March 6, 2023, Finance and Facilities Committee meeting for the School District of Waukesha. Glad that you're with us this evening. Have we been properly posted, Jess?
Yes, we have.
Okay, thank you. And now is the time to have our public comment period, and I don't think anyone has signed up and don't see anyone that would. Is that correct, Jess?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our action items. Our first action item is approval of the minutes from our February 6th, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Are there any discussions or changes that need to be made? There was just a quick one that was called in that you may or may not have. I just had added to when the meeting was called to order at 6 o'clock. It was called to order by me. So that was a really small change. All right. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, passes 5-0. Jess? Moving on to our vouchers. Sherry, did we have anyone call in questions?
Yes, I have 4 questions this month, plus some additional information on a voucher from last month that I was looking into. So first one, all questions were by Dr. Piasek, and we have, the first one is voucher P-card questions about the category we have of culturally and socially disadvantaged. It's a function that we use. It's actually an old DPI wording. When I went and double-checked the wording on the woofer now, it's been changed to instruction for multilingual students, so I have updated Skyward to now reflect that language. But it's, we use the 171000 when we're using our grant money, our Title III grant money. And Title III is language instruction for English learners and immigrant students. I have a call-in to D. Garcia to get more specifically at what reasons do they purchase the textbooks outside of our normal textbook usage. So I have not heard back from her, but I will follow up. Either I can get it to Darren for a Friday update or bring it back next month. Okay. Excuse me, the next voucher was for Goodhart Wilcox Publisher for $6,126. And they're e-textbooks for the an e-Achieve course on fashion and interior design. And this amount includes 2 books, one for fashion and one for interior design. And there are 3-year subscriptions for those books for this price. They're online books. And the course description is in the in your information sheet. Okay. Third voucher was for Brookfield Central High School for girls glacier hockey, and the question was, because we're paying Brookfield Central to participate, how many students are involved, and the students pay fees, do the students pay fees in addition to the, directly to Brookfield Central. So I just have to say over the last, month, I've learned more about hockey than I ever thought I would in my life, so this just added to it. The glacier hockey, it's very similar to our situation with the Wings hockey on the boys' side, only we run the co-op. So the $2,250 fee is for 3 athletes. They have a standard fee of $750 per athlete that we pay. That particular fee covers the administrative cost to run the program, the transportation, and the coach's fee. We do not charge our students an athletic fee to participate. And part of that is because then they also have to pay Brookfield Central fees to be on that co-op, and the overall fee is $1,750 that the parents have to contribute, and that mainly covers the ice time and jerseys. But in addition, they have to put down a $200 deposit on their uniforms. They have to put a $350 deposit down because they have to fulfill volunteer hours, and if they don't, then they lose money from that $350 deposit. Plus, any new students are responsible for purchasing their own bags, socks, and warm-up gear with the team logos on them.
Dr. Piasek?
Follow-up question on that, and thank you for that, Sherry, that's helpful.
Do our students who participate in that co-op hockey pay the base then 150 athletics
No,
fee?
they
They don't
do
pay
not.
any athletics fee?
No, they pay nothing to us.
Okay.
We just pay the co-op fee on their behalf, and then they pay the rest of the fees too. And I believe it's the same thing with boys hockey. I originally thought they paid the athletic fee, but I've since been told that they're not charged for the athletic fee due to the fact that hockey is already a very expensive sport for those families and students.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
Sorry.
I know that we talked about this when the last time I had a couple questions about the boys hockey. I'm just trying to understand, so if my daughter is in basketball, I pay a athletic fee once for her sport. How much is the district paying for hockey students? Does it
In this case,
wash?
for girls, it's $750. But we're not supplying any coaches or anything like that. That's to help cover our portion of the coaching fees that Brookfield Central provides.
So if I was going to do a comparison of sport to sport, athlete to athlete, the district is paying more out of pocket for hockey athletes than any other sport.
We'd have to evaluate that.
Not
because-
necessarily.
Right, we have other co-ops like that. We'd have to evaluate that. I don't want to answer that without digging
Golf.
into it. But there may be a sport where we have lower number of students, but we're still paying a coach. So it's really going to vary. We'd have to do an analysis on how much are we paying for coaches, the timekeeper, all the expenditures that go along with that sport.
Travel.
Travel.
Would be another-
Yep, thank you, the travel, and then look at what are we bringing in for athletic fees and kind of divide that out by students.
The number of teams a sport may have. Do you have a freshman team, two
Right.
JVs, and I mean, there's a lot of variables in all of that.
Dr. Piasek.
I just wanted to maybe respond to Mrs. Kozlowski's comment, because I'm not looking to break even on any of our athletics I was just asking the question about how the money flows, so I don't want to give the impression that I'm concerned about that. I do think, we budget resources for athletics, so that the $150 that the kids pay as an athletic fee isn't going to come close to covering the cost of coaches and facility upkeep and refs and all that stuff. So I don't think we're breaking even or even close to it for any sport. I do know, like for golf, for example, there's an adder to the athletics fee to cover some of the additional outside costs. So for the more expensive sports or where there's facility rentals involved, at least as that is an example, there's an additional fee that's passed along to the students. But hockey's just an interesting one because there's so many co-ops.
Right.
So I think we just need to understand that a little better.
And the girls' co-op acts very much like our boys' co-op in that the district pays the bills on their behalf and they make deposits to the district in Brookfield to cover the cost of the additional expenditures besides the coach, and that it's the ice time and those other costs that they're reimbursing the district for. It is unique. I had no idea that hockey was that expensive.
Mr. McCaffrey?
I think that would be nice to have a breakdown of all the sports and what it costs us. We did that, probably 10 years ago, and golf was the most expensive per student, which is why we added the fees at the time to bring the cost of the district down. But we did have a breakout, probably 10 years ago, where we had every sport that we have in the district and broke down what it cost per athlete to run that, I think it was a budget cutting, I think that we did it.
It was, yep.
So that would be great. I mean, that's a pretty simple thing to pull, right? We know how many athletes and how much a program, and we should know how much a program we're spending on the programs.
We can figure it out.
I know you can, 'cause they've done it
It's
before.
not an easy Skyward report because of the way we pay the coaches is all under one district.
It was a little bit easier when we had Schedule C, so.
Yeah, so
Right.
we can certainly do it. I guess I'd like to get an idea of the expectation of return time on getting that information back to the
It's
committee.
not urgent. in my
No,
opinion.
but it would be nice to see. We've been discussing it now for 2 meetings, so I
Okay.
think it would be awesome to see exactly what it is, so we don't have to go into another meeting.
We can do that.
Did you have any other questions called in?
I have one more question, and that is the boys' hockey. And the question was, there were a number of invoices, and they're just wondering, it's for like officials and ice time and busing that we paid in February, and wondering how that works as far as, do we invoice them back? And if we invoice them back for those expenditures, at what cycle? And they make deposits, like preemptive deposits with us. So they make deposits, then send bills, and we pay the bills. It isn't a one-on-one thing. They're not sending the exact amount for us to deposit. Like in the beginning of the year, they usually put a good chunk of money in there. So like as of right now, there's a surplus in district accounts of $13,926 for hockey to pay the expenditures. And then, so we're not really doing any invoicing back. We're paying the invoices based on the money that they have available. And at year end, we look at all the sports and their club money to make sure that nobody's gone over budget. And if anyone goes over budget, they have to repay the district for any fees. Or if it's a district sport, then the principal has to repay out of their budget because they're supposed to be watching that the athletic clubs are not going over on their spending.
I think it's good that we, in the case for the boys in Brookfield, or Elmbrook, is keeping track of the expenses on behalf of the team, because I just think it makes it cleaner that way, makes it easier on the vendors, and we should be able to see if there's any monkey business going on, as us being essentially the clearinghouse, as best as we can.
I would say, though, they do have a separate account. It's very similar to our setup with boys hockey, in that the boys hockey club has its own account, so does the Glacier hockey, and they feed the district money as they need to for the district to pay those bills. So it is something that we are getting more involved in, learning about our hockey structure and getting more transparency into just looking at how the flow is.
Do you feel comfortable with the processes that are in place?
We're evaluating those, and then we'll make a decision on that. But right now, we're still in the evaluation process. We're scheduled to go to one of the meetings to start with, to hear how they present their financial information, and there's going to be a meeting set up with the officers and Heather and I and the athletic director to just sit down and talk about where we can help as far as shoring up at processes if they need it, or just giving advice on what they're doing currently. And it might just be all perfectly fine, we just don't know because we're not involved in it yet.
Dr. Piasek?
I just have one more clarifying question, and I know there's a lot here, so it's okay if you don't know or if you want to go get it, but do other districts who are part of the Wings Boys Hockey Co-op pay us player fees as well?
They do. I don't know off
Or
the
north,
top of
I
my
should say.
head what that
Okay.
fee per student is, but we have it.
Okay.
I'll just have to look it up and we'll get that back out.
So like like we pay Elmbrook on the Glacier hockey, I don't know, there's
There's
8 or
only
9
2 right now in the co-op, but they're looking to get approval to add 2 more schools to the co-op because the number was dwindling and they want more support for the,
in the boys hockey? I don't know.
they don't have enough for a JV team this year is what we were told. Heather, back me up, isn't that what we were told? Okay. Yeah, that the numbers have gone down for the boys hockey, and so there's not enough players currently for a JV team. But it's interesting because if they give up ice time, they'll be bumped to the very bottom of a very long wait list, and they might not get that time back. So they're looking at getting approval to add 2 schools.
Two schools for next year.
For next
They do have enough for JV and varsity this year, but they have like 9
Seniors.
seniors that are graduating.
I'm sorry, thank you for that clarification.
And we can come back and follow up on that, because I did sign the co-op agreement a couple days ago, and there were quite a few teams on the list. So I think maybe what you're saying is that there are a lot of teams, but some of those teams potentially aren't producing players.
And that might be something I need to learn more about, because
Okay.
I know that there's varsity and JV, and I don't know if within those subset, there's additional teams. I'll need to continue to
Yeah,
learn
thank you.
that. So,
I
Mr.
appreciate
McCaffrey?
you guys looking into that.
Does that arrangement ever come up in the audit? Seeing that we're holding $13,000 of someone else's money? Or is that essentially what we're doing? right?
it would show up because it's in our Fund 21 account.
Okay.
So it's treated as any other sport having an activity type account. So yes, it gets audited on our end.
Okay.
There's no audit on the other.
No, I mean, when
There's
we do
no
our,
audit for us on the other end.
yeah, but I mean, when our auditor comes in and looks at all our books, do they ever say, why is there $13,000 of someone else's money sitting in our account who's not really associated with the school?
It wouldn't really jump out to them
Okay.
that it was someone else's money.
Okay.
It's, by the time it comes to us, it's for our sport club.
Okay.
So,
Any other questions on the vouchers?
and then I just had one clarification
Oh,
from last month. So
sure.
last month, the question was an Avid expense for $68,000 that was coded to employee travel. And I needed to dig more into that, and what I found was it is actually not employee travel at all. It's membership fees and educational materials for the teachers. So we have to reclassify it, and then I will be looking at all the fees in Avid to make sure they're getting coded properly and that the people coding them understand what the appropriate coding is. So it was not for employee travel, the $68,000. There was no actual employee travel in that figure.
Mrs. Kozlowski?
Thanks, Sherry. I'm going to follow up on that because the Avid question was mine from last month. I had asked also to get a full bridge of Avid spending across the district, and I get pieces from TNL. I know there was some ESSER. This is significant dollars that are being spent that show up different months, different years. I'd like to have over the last, say, 24 months.
24 months, okay, because I thought I shared last month the total that was spent for this year, though, but I did not provide 2 years. And that may take us a little bit more time because we just started coding everything for Avid to a specific project number to make it easier to report on. Not to say we can't do it, but it'll take a little more digging to probably get that second year.
Yeah, no, that'd be great, and part of it is because of what we've paid the funds with, whether it was ESSER, whether it was training. Avid was a big part over the last 2 years, and I don't feel like I have a really good picture as to everything that we're spending it on between staff training, when we talk about membership fees, educational materials, renewing how many kids are in the program, et cetera, right? I mean, all of
Yep.
these things are,
Yep, I just shared a total last month, so I can break that down into more detail.
That'd be great.
To show what categories
thank you.
it's for. You're welcome.
Any other questions on the vouchers? Otherwise, I would be looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. McCaffrey, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Piasek. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes 5-0. Jess? Moving on to a discussion and an action to be taken on the West High School entrance. Last month, we were presented with some plans, and Darren, you want to bring us up to speed on where those are at?
Yeah, actually, we were presented the easement. There's a permanent and a temporary easement for the project. And I think I put a draft into that when we first talked about this 2 or 3 months ago. I was hoping to have, I had legal counsel look at it. They sent some revisions back to the county, and I was hoping to have those revised documents for tonight, but I don't have them, so we'll agendize this for action in April.
Okay.
But I did put in docs just a drawing, so you, it's the entrance off of Salesville Road, so if you want to see the scope.
I think the drawing, the updated, that was a lot more clear than what we're looking at last month. So, any other questions or discussion points on this?
We're also working with West's leadership to make sure we miss graduation, all the big dates,
Sure.
because there will be some traffic detours or adjusted routes, so.
All right, thank you for that. Moving on to our discussion items, we'll start with our monthly budget report. Sherry?
Hey. Overall, everything's on target. There's a few things I just want to point out. First, with our revenue, we had our our local tax levy dollars coming in February, and we're almost identical to where we were at collection last year, 74.5% versus 74.2 or 3 last year at this time. We've settled all of the funds and the levy on all the funds, and everything else from now on will go into Fund 10, so we're in good shape with our tax levies. Interest continues to be very favorable, so we have quite the surplus compared to what our budget was for that. But unfortunately, in one of the following categories, we'll explain why we will need that elsewhere. So we'll be needing to come back with a budget amendment on that. And LGIP never posts in time for the meeting, but I got the statement today, and it's another $152,000 just in the LGIP interest that was added to the total, that'll be added to the total that's on the report. So it's a crazy amount of money to have.
That's hearkening back to the good old days.
Right, right.
We had spent many years not really earning anything, so.
So that leads me into the category called inter-district sources, and you're not seeing this yet because the open enrollment numbers happen at the end of the school year as far as all the dollar swapping between the DPI and the schools, but our open enrollment is falling short of last year and short of budget. So it's starting to, we had the pandemic and open enrollment just in eAchieve skyrocketed, and we expected it to plummet right away, and it did not. And now it's starting to show that rebound back to pre-pandemic levels. Unfortunately, our budget doesn't reflect that. So right now, our net in open enrollment between open enrollment in and open enrollment out is $825,000 off of budget. So we have a place for our interest money. So we'll be doing a budget revision to move that around.
What is the current enrollment in eAchieve?
Oh, goodness, I should have come prepared with that. I apologize.
I'd say around 800,
Okay,
yeah, somewhere in there.
okay.
That's a living number, too. It changes.
Right,
throughout the
it
year,
changes,
so.
yep.
But we had budgeted, we knew we'd come back down. COVID was a peak, as Sherry mentioned. Then we budgeted the midpoint between the peak and where normal was, but we had hoped that we would settle in higher than what historical norms were. But now we've fallen right back to where we were. And I think it's important to keep in mind there's fewer students out there, and there continues to be more online options as well. So there's a lot of factors on top of COVID out there that are making that number a little harder to predict at this point.
I just didn't want this to be a surprise coming into the year. We've been watching it, hoping that it would rebound some, because open enrollment does this, like, throughout the year, because students go out, they come back, other students come in, and we really had hoped that the trend would continue to, would go up, but it just hasn't, and I don't anticipate that at this point in time in the year that that's going to change.
Okay. When will we see the amendment?
I can get that ready for next month.
Okay.
Yeah, we could bring that one back easy.
Make a note. Okay. All right. Other than that, our grant money is coming in like normal from state sources and federal sources, everything. Some of we had a very tight turnaround, so not all of it made it into the report by the time we had to have the report ready. But I noted on here what all the different amounts were, so if you care to know, they're on the reports. And basically, we're at 45% collection on our revenue versus 48.8 last year, so we're running at a point where we want to be. Salaries and benefits going into the expenses. Our trend is still that Fund 10 is running a little bit with a surplus, but Fund 27 is running a little bit with a deficit, but together they offset. So that's not an area of concern at this point. Don't expect it to become one. Purchase services, top areas are the same ones as we always have: personal services, utility, advertising, and then something called payment to a VTAE district, which basically now is called Wisconsin Technical College. So I updated schools. I updated that in Skyward too to be more reflective of what it actually is. And that's the program that we have with WCTC, a dual enrollment program where the students can be getting the college credits while they're also enrolled. And we had a payment of, where did that go? I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't point that out, but it was one of the larger payments. There was also a large advertising payment from eAchieve going to a Visionary Studios, which is a consulting firm they're now working with on their advertising. So that was not the payment for the advertising fee alone. The consulting fee alone was relatively small. That was also including all of the ads that the advertising company was placing. So I believe the consulting firm in itself was about $2,200 fee that was associated with that particular invoice. Other than that, not much else going on. Our spending is looking good, 43.91% of the approved budget versus 44 last year. Fund 10, Fund 27, we've already talked about salaries and benefits and where we're at. For revenue, again, you're not going to see this on the report because we didn't have time to get it all booked before we had to run the report, but we received several payments. They're all detailed in here for special education grants and our categorical aid, basically. Other than that, not a lot of expenditures to report in February, and overall, we're in good shape with our budget, with the exception of the two items we've talked about with interest and open enrollment.
Other questions on it? Mrs. Kozlowski?
Yeah. Getting back to taking a look at the eAchieve, when we're talking through the enrollment numbers that we're starting to see the decline, and then I take a look at the marketing spend that we're doing. We've talked a lot about how our marketing budget is mainly for eAchieve. I'd be interested to see if the marketing costs are hitting districts where we currently have enrollment, or if we're expanding out there. Hopefully that the marketing impact would help us either maintain and or grow the eAchieve enrollment. But another piece to take a look at when we're looking at coming up on the next budget cycle, declining enrollment that is now hitting eAchieve, as well as the marketing side that we had hoped would continue to keep us growing. So I'd like to at least see where we're marketing and if we're getting any traction on where we're marketing.
Absolutely, I will work with eAchieve to get that information back out to the committee.
One of the things that we've done in the past, and actually for quite a number of years, we would have eAchieve come in and give a full report to this committee, and it would cover things like advertisement, but it would also, go over a variety of topics. Classes, how many teachers we have, a breakdown between full-time students and ones that are, just taking a class here or there. Maybe we want that bigger picture at some point in time, just to consider. So I'm not sure where that fits into the agenda, Darren, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. And
We did it up to COVID.
yeah,
right?
Yep. Yep, and I would bet that one of the things that's hurting us too is, people, once they enrolled, when COVID was happening and they enrolled, if they had like maybe another year or two left, they might stay with us, and now we're starting to see that drop off as they graduate. I don't know if we can determine that or not, But if you're
Be able to get that.
if you're a sophomore and you enrolled during COVID, the first year, you probably stay on the second year. And since you were there for 2 or 3 high school years, you probably, would stay for your senior year. So just a thought. Let us know, Darren, when we can maybe work that into the
Yeah.
agenda. I want to say there was a break-even student amount that we had at one time. I'm sure that number has changed. The break-even student amount for Achieve to make sense used to be 600 students would need to be enrolled. And I don't know where that stands now. I think next month, if you could provide, or maybe it's just when we have Achieve come by, but no, I think next month for this, if you could give us what our budgeted, what we projected for students coming in, students going out, brick and mortar, and E-Achieve, for budget versus actual, and again, actual continues to change, probably every day. We could, I think have a better overall picture of how we're doing from an open enrollment perspective. And I know if we didn't have E-Achieve, we would be in the negative. It's been pretty much, that's one of the reasons why we started it back in, 2004-ish? Something like that? Yeah, one of the reasons. There were other reasons too, but it has helped. It has helped literally every year, so. Those numbers would be appreciated, though.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Any other questions, comments on this budget?
And the only other thing is the health insurance and dental, but Darren's about to do a report that details a lot more, so I'm not going to share that.
Yeah,
in my report.
yeah. We'll just roll right into that, why don't we?
Sure. Let's see if I can get there. All right. So we talked about this a few months ago, about maybe it was last month, just kind of an overall report on where our health insurance and dental insurance program, but obviously health insurance gets the most attention because of the costs involved. So this is a flow chart. Actually, I presented to F&F, I don't know, 3-4 years. It's been a while, about how the accounting works, because we are self-funded. So we technically don't have premiums. We have funding rates, at least that's what we call them. But the process is the same, except for you don't have a third party that you're sending a bill to automatically based on a premium. You're paying actual claims. So we developed the funding rates, and HNI, who's our consultants, who's been here with the clinic and other health changes or adjustments or conversations we've had, we sit down and we develop a projection of what the following year's premium rates are going to be. And we're just into that right now. We had one call last week and trying to define what exactly that is. And then what we've done in terms of the funding rates and the budget for the last, at least 4 or 5 years, we've said, we'll take on a 5% increase in health costs, but if the renewal is coming in above that, it's plan design changes or copay changes or premium copay or whatever, to get to that 5% increase, and we've gone through that process. This year, because of zero increase in state funding and inflation where it's at, we've lowered that to no change in health funding rates, so no change in our budget for the 23-24 school year. So we're working through that. The accounting, it's very payroll-driven. We put in there a benefit code and an employee expense code, the funding rate divided by, assuming they do the HRA stuff, 88 to 12%. And that runs through payroll, and all these dollars go into liability accounts on our balance sheet because we owe that money at some point. There's an obligation to pay claims. So that's when we talk about the IBNR, that's the conversation that we're having. But we also have reserved fund balance dollars that the board has set aside for the specific use of meeting claims. If our claims are much higher than what our funding rates are producing, and we did have that 4 or 5 years ago now, where we did dip into the reserves, but that's there for that purpose. And but now we're on the other side of that, where we've been adding during COVID health insurance costs dropped. People didn't go to the doctor. Procedures were postponed. And then we gathered all those dollars we could because we thought the big wave coming out of COVID was going to hit. And well, I don't think that's here yet. It's not very noticeable. It's more of a trickle, if anything. So for this year, we set aside $750,000 of reserves that could be utilized for claims if needed. And we might have to tap into that number a little bit, but it doesn't look, speaking of things that change on a daily basis, health costs are certainly one of those. It doesn't look like we're going to go anywhere near using all those dollars for claims. So all these dollars sit on the balance sheet, and then we get bills for actual service. I went to the doctor, got my physical, it's $100 and whatever dollars or $200. They send me a bill, ProHealth or United Healthcare, send me a bill for that, we pay that. So if no one goes to the doctor or don't go as often, like COVID, our balance sheet is growing, and those reserves are stronger. So at the bottom, I have a very summarized financial picture. Ideally, we have 5 or 6 months of health plan expenditures available. We spend about $1.75 million per month on healthcare, so it's a sizable amount of dollars, and it could shift quickly. So as of February 28th, which isn't the perfect date to take this snapshot, but it's the latest information we have $5.3 million in reserved fund balance, and $8.1 million of dollars set aside for claims that are sitting on the balance sheet. So if we have another good year, we might ask the board to come up and reserve more of fund balance, but we're kind of playing that by ear. So I do think with our renewal, talking about using some of the reserves to maybe buy down 1% or 2% on the health insurance renewal, because we are getting to the point where you really don't want to gather much more in reserves. I don't think it could get triggered in the audit, even though I don't think I don't know how hot and heavy they are on it. We could also get communications from DPI saying, these reserves are getting a little high. So I think we're in a good place. Again, the dollars they seem huge, but it's a huge cash flow. You're talking over $21 million in dollars going back and forth related to health insurance costs, whether it's our consultant or the health networks or anything else in between the clinic. So that's the flow of the.
And it's not evenly spread out.
No. So that's the flow of it and where we are as of last week. So we come out with 7.68 months of reserves that are either, again, on the balance sheet or in fund balance. So I think we're in a very good place. So I didn't redo this sheet for dental because it's the same flow. Accounting-wise, it's exactly the same. We've done very well with the self-funded dental plan. We switched to that, I want to say, 5 years ago. It's done very well. The reserves in there are to the point where I'm, at this point, going to budget the use of some of that or a drop in the funding rates. But dental's a completely different game. You're capped at $2,000 per insured. You know exactly what your exposure is. So we'll adjust that because the reserves are a little high. And those costs, the premium or funding rates are split between employee and employer as well. So,
Any questions or comments on this? Yeah, I appreciate this, Darren. I think when we first started out, our consultants said our first target was you need a minimum of 3 months reserves. And it took us a bit to get there. I mean, it didn't happen overnight. And the 5 to 6 months, ideally, does that come from them also? Is that their recommendation, or where did you get that 5 to 6?
Kind of on the 4-5 side, and I'm on the 5-6 side because I've seen health insurance turn so quickly. I've also seen districts that really try to hold at that end up getting in trouble at that 3 to 4 month level. This has been quite a few years ago, but a district just down the freeway got into major trouble because they didn't follow what their consultant was saying the funding rate should be because they wanted to hit a bargaining target or whatever. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you get a couple bad years in a row So this 5 to 6 month is close to what they say, but it's more where I'd like to see us at.
Okay. And that's a nice way to look at this in terms of months. I think it's easy to wrap your head around, well, we have this many months in reserve. I like how you present this. Anything else? All right, thank you for that. I'm moving on to our ESSER update. Who's going to take that?
This is Jess.
Okay, Jess, take her away.
Well, all right, so now that the board has approved all of our ESSER spending at the last month's board meeting, we kind of wanted to provide an update to where all of these funds are going. ESSER 1, we had about $1.2 million that has been fully obligated and fully claimed through WISE grants. The performance period was March of 2020 through September of 2022. Like I said, we have spent all of that money. 78% is what we spent on learning recovery, including teacher and sub-salaries, software, and technology. We only spent 17% on COVID response, including medical and cleaning supplies, and then we had that small portion that we had to spend on the private school share. For ESSER 2, the performance period will end this September 30th. About 75% of these funds have been obligated in WISE grants. We're just waiting on the remaining quotes in order to obligate the remaining funds. So far, 1.6 million has been claimed, and we can expect another 1 million to be claimed and received this month. It's important to note we cannot claim the funds until we have incurred the expense. So for example, we have obligated $2 million for HVAC work, but we've only paid invoices for $56,000, so we can only claim $56,000 so far. For ESSER 2, we've obligated 48% for learning recovery, such as tailored acceleration, tutoring, summer school, and instructional materials. 28% is for the HVAC work. We've designated 15% for budget balancing, and then 9% is COVID response and some indirect expenses. ESSER 3, we've got a little bit over $10 million there. The performance period for this one will end in September of 2023. We have fully obligated all of these funds in WISE grants, and so far we've claimed $172,000.
24. September of 24.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, you just said.
Did I say 23? For ESSER 3, there was a minimum of 20% that we had to spend on learning recovery. We have hit 26%. Some of those items are social and emotional support, teacher training, tailored acceleration, summer school programming, and instructional materials. The remaining amount for ESSER 3 is for the HVAC work. Overall, we had $19 million in ESSER 1, 2, and 3. We have spent 37% of all ESSER funds on learning recovery. ESSER funds do cross over fiscal years, so while we might incur expenses this year, we might not receive those funds until the next fiscal year. That's our overview.
Questions or comments on the update? Dr. Piasek?
Thank you. Thank you for that detailed evaluation. I really appreciate that. It's good to see it all in one place. With respect to just the annual expenditures and revenue, so DPI will allow us to not have that balance if we incur expenses, but we don't recognize, or we don't
What-
receive revenue until the
We
following
book a
year?
receivable.
Receivable, so it looks like we did get it.
It would show up on this year's books. If we had expenditures for this year, we book the revenue, and then we put it in a receivable account waiting for the money to show up. So we don't physically get the money till next fiscal year, but it will be on the books as revenue in this fiscal year if the expenditures happen.
Thank you.
So it's an accrual process. Okay.
And as we've talked about here, and I think just other conversations, with the state budget process, there's reports out there, I think Dr. Piazza shared a website that looks like we haven't done anything with the money. But like the HVAC work, for example, there's a lot of planning, a lot of front-end work. We're just now starting to cut POs for the equipment and such, so it might look like, if you run a report, that we haven't done much, but we are fully allocated. There's a plan for every dollar that was provided through the 3 ESSER programs. So if you do get into conversations with your, or our representatives, I think that's a strong message to say that we have fully utilized, and we will hit those timelines for fully expending those.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that, Jess. Moving on to other recommendations for future committee meetings. Any suggestions for, we had 1 or 2 suggestions. Anything else that we want to add to the agenda? Okay, we do have a need to go into closed session. So this will wrap up our open session. We will not come back in to open session once the closed session is done. Do I have an emotion? An emotion? Wow. Do I have a motion to go into closed session? Dr. Piasek.
Thank you. I move to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses E, for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session pupil transportation contract.
Is there a second to that? Second by Mrs. Robertson. Still have to look at your name, Karen. Sorry. Jess, will you take the roll call vote?
Dr. Piasek?
Aye.
Mrs. Robertson?
Aye.
Mr. Como?
Aye.
Ms. Kozlowski?
Aye.
Mr. McCaffrey?
Aye.
Okay, thank you for watching us out there in TV land, and hopefully you'll tune in for the rest of the meetings this week. We'll now go into closed session. Have a good day.